Hello, everyone, and welcome to Strong Start Sundays. My name is Dr. Rachel Edoho-Eket, and I'm so excited to have you joining us tonight. We would love for you to take a moment to write your name, tell us your position and your location. Where are you watching us from tonight? I'm so excited to welcome Constance Sherrod. She is tuning in tonight from Pearl, Mississippi. It is always wonderful to see you, Constance. Thank you so much for joining. And we're looking forward to an excellent conversation tonight. Now, tonight I have such a special guest that I am honored to have her on the program tonight. Her name is Jen Womble, and she is the chair of the FETC, which is an amazing conference and organization that really supports education. And Jen is a huge advocate for all things education. Jen, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm excited for the mission that you're on to really support leaders and what they're doing, and anything we can do to amplify that work is why we're here tonight.
Yes, thank you so much. I also see Otis Kitchen. Thank you so much, Otis, for coming tonight. I knew you are from Florida, which is actually where Jen Womble is. Yes. And he's an amazing elementary school principal. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight, Otis. And I want to remind you that if you have not received your copy of Relational Intelligence, the Key Factor to Exceptional School Leadership, please pick up your copy. It's available on Amazon. This is a book that I co-wrote with the amazing Dr. Brad Johnson. We really wrote this book for school leaders and for educators to think about ways we can continue to serve people to the best of our ability. And relational intelligence is so important for all of us as leaders to have. It's about the soft skills. We call them soft skills, but really they are the most important skills that we have when we're working with people to show our care and our concern and know that people are beyond educators. They are real people with real families and real things happening. And so relational intelligence is that special way to really keep the wonderful staff in our buildings. So with that, we want to get into tonight's conversation. Tonight's conversation is all about keeping joy at the center of change. And as we know, as school leaders and educators, there's a lot of change that is constantly happening in our schools. There's always something new. There's things that we need to evolve and do. And I know Jen knows this as well. When we're working with change, people are the most important part of that process. So Jen, let's get into this conversation. When you and I were talking, you were talking about this wonderful trapeze. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. And I am very glad that you are tackling this. I love that you said the joy here of change, but I think it's also challenge because we are experiencing lots of challenge in education. So sometimes those two are going hand in hand, but finding joy in it is a special treat. So there is definitely something called the parable of the trapeze. And so when I often work with leaders in ed tech, we talk about what does it take to get people to take a little risk or to try something new and to actually just spark change. So the parable of the trapeze is an interesting story back from the 1800s in France when circuses were trying to become popular again, and the trapeze was invented by somebody named Jules Leotard, just like the leotards we wear to keep tight clothes. But he had a problem getting people to do the trapeze with him, building a team that would do what he wanted to do that was going to be new and exciting. And the problem was when people would swing on the bar back and forth, they would have a hard time letting go and taking a risk. So swinging from one trapeze to the other and what it takes to really let go and to take risk and to have courage. And so, of course, what he ended up doing was thinking about this in a little bit of a different way. So we added a net under the bottom, right? So we have the safety net. So when we think about as leaders, what are the safety nets that we need to put into place to support our teachers and our, other leaders in the building that really will help them take risk and to be courageous? They can identify some of the trouble spots, right? They already know what those are. But how as leaders are we constantly supporting them and mentoring them and coaching them so they will let go and then have this great outcome, right? And because a lot of times it takes that risk letting go. we are asking people to do things that they were never trained to do. There was no AI when they were in school and being trained. There were none of these tech tools, and sometimes science of reading or whatever platform that we're trying or technique that we're doing. So how do we get them to be courageous and have joy in this process, right? And take the risk. So leaders need to think about coaching, mentoring, supporting with professional development, and also role modeling. What does this look like? What do you expect from me? What are the outcomes? So we can talk about all these pieces together, but I think that's really the foundation of great leadership. And this, I love what you're talking about, relational intelligence, and really the relational age, because the humans are the advantage right now.
Yeah. And first of all, I'm thinking of this trapeze, right? And the analogy of teaching someone to let go. And then I'm thinking, boy, I don't think I would want to let go if there was no net. That's number one. So I'm glad that net, he thought of that net. And I really thought about, I'm a former student athlete as well. And I used to run hurdles, and I remember falling constantly. But it did take a risk to get up, to have that coach say, Rachel, come back again and try again. You know, in our role as school leaders, we are asking, like you said, we're asking teachers and our staff to do a lot. We are asking a lot of our teachers and staff. And so to ask someone to do something without that safety net, without that coaching, really does not set someone up for success. And so part of our conversation tonight are what specific behaviors can we do as school leaders to really support and help our teachers, especially, as you said, as we're doing lots of new things. We have AI, we have science of reading. Some of us have new math standards. I know in the state of Maryland, we have new math standards that we'll be learning next year and putting into place for our students. And so throughout that process, it's really important that we are bringing people along with us. So one of the points that we wanted to lift up tonight is to make sure that we are leading with people. So I want you all to think about a challenge in your school right now, or something new that you know is coming down the pike. This is the springtime in our schools, but we know the summer is coming, and then the fall will be coming as well. And so there are some changes that are going to be happening over the course of the next couple of months. And so I want you to think about a change that's happening in your school right now, or that you know is coming up. And I want you to really frame and think about through the process, how can you support? So one of the things we want to share is thinking about how we can lead with people and not just asking or telling people to do things. And one of the ways that we can do that is by having a small group of people. Maybe we have a group of teachers who are really passionate about something, or they want to pilot something in a smaller way. That's a great group to start with. Give them that opportunity to be innovators, to be leaders within the building, so that as school leaders, we don't have to take on all of that. Because frankly, the credibility really comes from our teachers and our staff. We have some level of credibility as school leaders, but when teachers talk with other teachers, that's when they really have that significant level of influence. What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, I loved that when you were talking about as an athlete and you had to fall and the courage it took to get back up, because we only learn through failure. And a lot of times we don't get a chance or a safety net to try some new things. So I love, as a school leader, saying to people what's not working and admit that everything's not working great. Like sometimes as leaders, we need to really be able to say, some things are not working and we need to experiment with a new way of doing things. So I love this idea of a small group of teachers or a small, and sometimes support staff as well, right?
Mhm.
And then working together. And sometimes it's just saying, what small test could we run? What little experiment could we do? Maybe just for a couple weeks. Like, don't burden people with it, but hey, if we think this might work, let's try it out. Let's test it out. Let's do a really small, we used to call it in psychology, right? Chunking. Let's take a little chunk of something and try it and see what happens and run that test for a couple of weeks. And then let's go back to the drawing board and say, did this work? Is this helping? And really create a team where you're all together as a testing team with equal amounts of feedback. Because being able to admit that everything's not working right is the first step towards change. Because when we can identify what that situation is, and then we're able to say, here are some possible solutions, let's experiment what's worked, and then bring them in as a team. And then the solution is on them. They're the ones providing the evidence for what will move forward in a way. And then that execution is going to show other teachers, oh, their team was able to make this work. So I think we can do it too. And I think that builds confidence in the support network. And then that original team becomes your mentors to now mentor other groups. So if you're using like a Rick DeFore model where you're using professional learning communities, each of those can then become a leader of each of those communities to help, something be initiated more school wide. That's a
Yes,
great idea.
I love everything that you said because it's very practical. Like you said, you start with a small group, but really it's like coaching the coaches. And so, what I heard when I heard you talking about how teachers are empowered in that role is really having the teachers take ownership of that change. Again, when we're school leaders and we're telling teachers and staff who are very competent in their roles, stop, change, you need to do this, that never goes over well. We don't like to be told what to do as school leaders, and neither do our teachers and staff. But what I heard Jen say was if we have the teachers become empowered and take on some of that responsibility and that ownership, then you have that co-leadership going on that we're all seeking. We really need that co-leadership and that ownership together because then it becomes our own. Then the school can say, hey, we've listened to feedback. We tried this. This worked well. This didn't work as well. Here are some circumstances in our school that will work and some things that make this more challenging. And we need to make some adjustments. And when our teachers and staff have that ability to give that input, it makes a huge difference in how the change is received from our staff.
Yes.
So Jen, thank you for lifting that up.
Yeah. And I love the piece about input and autonomy because, tying this back to the idea of joy, we know that people are personally motivated and incentivized when they have autonomy. And then also when they're working towards mastery. Because I truly believe that every teacher gets up every day and goes, listen, I want to teach the kids the best I can. Like they might not always know what the strategy is, or they might not know what they're going to encounter in the day. But I believe that they're trying to master teaching. They're trying to master student behavior, right? So if we give them that autonomy and support and then know and understand that they are coming with positive intent to try to master that is going to help create a team that's curious and they're going to really help students in the end. I think that's going to improve outcomes.
Absolutely. And we have some comments from the chat, so I want to lift some of those up. Otis was saying, empowering educators to be leaders in the building and decision makers is really important. We agree 100%. I mean, we've been in buildings sometimes where you don't have that sense of autonomy and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. The trust is not there. And we know that trust is the foundation of everything that we do. And so when we as principals and assistant principals say, hey, I'm trusting you to lead this work, please give us feedback. Let us know what's working, what needs to be adjusted. That makes a big difference in how that change is received. So thank you so much, Otis, for lifting that up. And then Constance Sherrod said kind of what you said, Jen, that failure is a part of the learning process. And we have to accept that and share that. And, Constance, I'm so glad you lifted that up because when we think about authentic leadership and when we think about that vulnerability as leaders to say, I've made mistakes, when I've learned something new, I've gotten past it. Here's what I learned as a result of that. I'm here to support you through that process too. That makes a huge difference. Whether we are with novice teachers or veteran teachers or second career teachers and staff members, everyone wants to feel supported by leadership. And so just by making ourselves vulnerable in that moment and saying, I've struggled with this too. I was once new in this, or I'm learning with you, right? The same thing we can say now with AI, I'm learning alongside you. Even better yet, I'm sitting in the training meetings with you for professional learning. That's such a powerful statement when we as leaders can sit in and learn alongside our teachers and staff. That makes a huge difference. Jen, any other thoughts you added?
Yeah, I totally agree. I was just thinking, as you were saying that a lot of times we have to investigate why something failed, because as a leader, our job is to remove the barriers. What barriers are there that teachers are not having success so that we can remove them? But if we are not really digging into why things aren't working and we're revealing why they're not working, then we'll never figure out how do we better support you? How do we remove barriers? How do we get rid of challenges? How do we better communicate? All of the things that a leader actually needs to do to support their staff. we'll never know the answers if we don't investigate what's not working, and so we definitely need the courage to, identify situations that are happening there. And that's something that's not always, doesn't feel positive. It doesn't feel like that good positive energy that most teachers have, but because we have to admit that things are not working well, and that's okay, because not everything works for every child. That's why we differentiate, right? But we just
Yes.
have to keep curious and keep wondering and keep seeing how this can improve over time. And that's just really the beauty of learning too. And then everybody feels uplifted when everybody's had their input as to what they think, and they can see throughout the system and identify, with empathy, how can we do this better?
Yeah, and that dovetails actually perfectly into the next point, Jen. When we're talking about time and space, teachers and staff need time and space to explore, to be curious. And I think that's one of the hardest barriers that we face as school leaders and as educators. There's never enough time in the day to provide. But, as we are seeing changes and we know and can anticipate changes that are coming down the pike, that gives us an opportunity as school leaders to plan time for those changes. So, one of the recommendations I have is, as we're working through change, to communicate the change as early as possible. That's really important because no one likes to be blindsided. And if we know that a change is coming that's going to impact the schools, it's important that we communicate that with our leadership team, with our teachers and staff, so that people are prepared mentally. Some of the first battle is just that mental preparation of something is changing. How can I wrap my head around that? And then what can I do? So I'm a big proponent of, once you know a change, communicating it early, and then giving people time and space to process. And if you have learning materials that are available, for instance, in my district, we had a new reading program, and we are already getting some of those materials for reading and math right now. This is a great time that teachers have to at least start opening the boxes and the materials, to start looking at them, right? To think about, how could I incorporate this into my classroom next year? And to start sitting down as a team and start some of that co-planning, collaborative planning. And that's what we're doing right now. We're kind of using some of the springtime to start looking at those math materials and those reading materials for next year. And we're also looking at, some schools have already piloted some of the new programming, and we're setting up some times for teachers to go visit other schools. So if you have some new things coming, it's great for teachers to have that ability to start previewing some of those materials or start practicing and experimenting with them.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, and I'll definitely add to that. I think I love your bit about communicating early, but also communicating to your community, not just your teachers, because sometimes these changes, you can get a lot of community support either through your, school advisory boards and your school parenting groups by communicating early. Like, a lot of times, the reason parents and your community friends, stakeholders, will get upset is when something just happens to them all of a sudden and they weren't prepared. But sometimes warming up your community with small focus groups and letting them know, here's the change coming. How do you think we should communicate to parents? How do you think we should tackle a new book? Like, a lot of times, bringing in these focus groups and community groups, so not just communicating to staff, but also the broader community. And the second piece I was going to add is intention. As a leader, being really intentional and role modeling this change, but not making it look like it's one more thing or it's an additional duty, but somehow put it into the things you're already doing. For example, I was just talking to a principal in another school district, and she said she's been trying to add a little piece of a way that she's using AI into every staff meeting, but just role modeling what she's trying and what she's experimenting. And then she actually took the last staff meeting, put it into Notebook LM, and made it into a podcast, and told everybody that they didn't have to come to the faculty meeting that day, but they could listen to the podcast instead, which was, she said, for health, I want you to go walk, be with your kids, play, but listen to it in a different way. And so, being intentional about what's coming ahead as a role model, you might not have all the answers, but you can start to kind of drip out some intentionality through your meetings where it looks more natural, reading an excerpt of a new book, trying a new math problem, but insert that into what you're already doing instead of making it look like another heavy layer on your team.
I love that strategy so much. And I like you said, kind of those drips. That's really important, because a lot of the times when we hear something is changing, we're thinking, okay, oh my goodness, it's going to be totally different or it's not going to incorporate well. But I really love that strategy that you shared about thinking about how can we already show much of what's new we're already doing, and it's a way just to incorporate it and to fold it in. I really like that. And what a great learning experience for that staff to be able to listen to a podcast that was created from AI. That's really cool. There's so many cool functions of AI. And I think sometimes because it's so big and massive, it's hard to think kind of a smaller scale. How can we start with it? So I really like the idea of what the principal is doing and showing and modeling, like you said, how we can use it in a way that helps and doesn't feel like it's something else to the plate, because we have enough of that already, right? We have enough things that feel like we're already being piled onto the plate. So making it helpful and making it practical is such a great way for the principal to model that for her staff. So that's great.
Yeah. And we don't have enough mentors, right? And unfortunately, the time and structure of our school day is sometimes really difficult for doing this. We would love to have more time to mentor and coach, and really that's what a lot of teachers need. But if we can model that through leadership as often as possible, and just really think about that intentionality, and not just take every little meeting or interaction you have for granted, but really being intentional about it and throwing in the vocabulary that people need to know next year, like really capitalizing on the strengths of your team. And then I also love that approach of picking out some team members to lead the change too, and see them as kind of the head coaches or the head leaders through it, and really empowering that team to be seen as the ones who we know are your teachers are steeped in pedagogy. They're steeped in child behavior. They're steeped in cognitive, understanding. Let them be the ones to make the decision about how this change should take place and be rolled out. And a lot of times our other teachers will really respect that as well. So I think that intentionality as a leader is so important.
Yes, definitely. And that respect, right? What we're saying is we respect and we trust you to make decisions on behalf of students that you know best, right? Yeah. And I also love taking back to another point that you said, Jen, just including the community and the families is such an important part of the change process. A lot of times families will also feel blindsided if they do not have a heads up about changes that are going to significantly impact their children. And so, yes, I love the idea of focus groups or meeting with our PTAs and saying, here, this is something that is coming and we want you to know, and we want you to be a part of the process, right? Tell us what your needs are so that we can incorporate that input and feedback as well. That really is tying in the entire community buy-in into that process, and even telling students, hey, there are some changes that we want you to be aware of too. We've been studying this, and this next year we're going to be incorporating that. That also helps our students to get prepared too, because students also may struggle sometimes with change too. So the more information that we communicate with the entire stakeholder groups, the better. So I really appreciate you lifting that up too, Jen. And that brings us to our last point. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I was going to say, and make sure that group is very diverse. Include people who you might think are always challenging you, because it's okay to recognize, like, you know what, not everything might not be going the best way. And that's why we're going to change. Like, it's okay to challenge assumptions. It's okay to say, these are the things working and not working, and bring those people in as well. Because a lot of times in the end, they become your biggest advocates. So don't be afraid of making a really diverse group of your community stakeholders, not just the people who always sign up to come in. Those don't always help us get where we need to be. We need people who can see all sides of the puzzle to really help us get through this.
Very much so. And I like to call those blind spots. And sometimes we have blind spots when we're always listening to those same people and the same input. And so I agree with you, having people with a different perspective at the table is really important, because that's how we can get the best product and the best results possible, is when it's not just people who agree with us, but also people who are going to challenge some of our positions so that we can make adjustments to become better. Otis, thank you so much for those compliments and Constance as well. I can't believe it. It's only 5 minutes left. I told you this goes fast, Jen. I told you.
Too fast.
Yes. So we want to take it to our last point, and much of what we've talked about today in terms of leading with people and the trapeze analogy and making sure that teachers have time and space to explore and experiment with any new changes. The last part of it is really about celebrating progress and sustaining the momentum. Much of what Jen and I have talked about tonight is really about systems leadership and making sure that our teachers have systems in place where you have a small group who might pilot or start something, they then become the experts in the building. And then as you expand the reach, you have people who are already knowledgeable with the program and with the changes that can then speak to the leadership and coaching of other people and providing real world examples. And so the last part is really thinking about how can we share and lift up the staff who are leading the work, right? How can we recognize our staff and celebrate them, and maybe newsletters or emails through pictures, look at the great work that's happening. Thinking of ways where we can celebrate our students. Wow, the data is saying this, since we incorporated this part of this program, here's the change that we're seeing with our students and staff. That really gets that collective buy-in from all the stakeholders, our staff, our students, our families, when we're able to uplift the great things that are happening as a result of the changes that have come. What are your thoughts, Jen?
Yeah, I think that really joy comes in a school when people see that their energy is shifting the outcomes for students. And a lot of times that's where we put our time and energy that you've been talking about building. And then when that really works and we see that shift for students, and the students feel it too. But the reality is we have to celebrate the process, because it might not always pan out the way we want it to, right? It might not always be where we are. So we always have to focus on what the evidence is. But I love when leaders ask questions like, who is showing courage today? Like, it might not just be somebody who's leading the way, but who did something courageous? And what does that look like? And recognizing that for students and for teachers, it's not easy to be courageous. Sometimes it might be asking a new friend to sit by you at lunch, right? So courage can look different. But for a teacher, it can be trying something new because they want to make sure that every student has, every learning opportunity. So we need to recognize that takes courage. And they're taking risk and they need support. So recognizing the process as well, the outcomes might not have been exactly what you wanted, but you had the courage to try something new. And the multiple times that you're trying something new, taking a risk, over time, you're going to figure out through this experimentation what is the best for each of your students. And then you can celebrate the student outcomes as well. But I think thinking about and just wondering about being curious, are you showing courage? Are you taking the risk? Are you willing to try something new? And to really celebrating that, because that's a different way of thinking in the classroom than we've asked before. And so really kind of nurturing the process and helping people all think together. I wonder if we tried this. And being curious about if this is working and asking questions in that way that you can then celebrate them, right? Just for trying, just for taking that leap, just for letting go a little bit, right? Just for you're trying to fly or trying new things. We're keeping the learning going each time. Those students are going to really soar when the teachers have autonomy. They're working towards mastery. You're being intentional with them. Every step of that process as a leader is actually kind of sitting back and trying to help. How can they execute better, and how can you support them?
Yes, it's so true. It's the same thing that we tell students, Jen. We tell students, take a risk, see what happens. And it's the same thing that we as adults need to do as well.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. We know that, but it is important for us to try something new, because honestly, that's how we grow. Every time we take a risk and we try something new, we learn something from it, and we grow as a result of that. So that's so true.
We actually grow a dendrite. We actually grow a brain cell. Brain seeks novelty. And every time we learn something new and try something new, we know we grow a little dendrite. Our brain gets a little stronger. Our web gets a little bigger. And so we just have to empower that in adults the same way we do kids.
So true. And I saw Principal Kafele here. It's wonderful to see you. Thank you for dropping in today. And Constance is lifting up your wonderful advice, Jen. But we have come to the end of our episode. That was so quick. And so I want to start with a little bit of a summary of what we discussed tonight, and thinking about how we can support joy and keeping that joy through change. What we talked about, first of all, that trapeze example and letting go, but having that safety net of support for our teachers and staff and community members and our students is so critically important. We also talked about leading with people and not just telling people what to do, because we're not going to be successful if we're just telling people what to do. We also shared the importance of having teachers having time and space to explore and to learn some new things. And we also talked about celebrating those wins and sustaining that momentum that is so important for us, because we know over time, change, if we're doing a change and we don't institute it well, it's going to fall away. We're going to revert right back. So if this is something that is important and that we need to do moving forward, we have to have systems and structures in place to make sure it is sustainable. And with that, I want to thank you so much, Jen, for coming on to Strong Start Sundays. We loved all of your insights, and all of your examples were really, really practical tonight. So thank you again for joining us.
And thank you for helping the leaders around this country and the world, right, to understand that relational intelligence is really what we're going to need in the world of AI and technology. And these are the things and the skills that we want our students to learn to be really future forward.
Absolutely. And speaking of relational intelligence, if you have not picked up your copy of the book, please do so. If you go on Amazon, you can type in Dr. Brad Johnson or Dr. Rachel Edoho-Eket, and you'll see it there, and you can pick up a copy. We hope that you enjoy this very, very practical piece that we've written just for you. And I also want to share with you our next episodes of Strong Start Sundays in May are going to be May 3rd and May 17th. On May 3rd, we're going to have the wonderful Dr. Zalvan Globan. She is the superintendent out on the West Coast. And so we're really excited to have her. And then on May 17th, we'll be having Jimmy Cassis join us to talk about culture and some of the wonderful ways that we can leave a legacy as we are closing out our school year. I want to thank everybody for coming on tonight and spending your Sunday evening with us. I am wishing you a wonderful rest of your week to start strong as we start our day tomorrow. And I also want to thank Teacher Goals for this amazing platform and the ability to connect with so many amazing educators and leaders all across the world. Have a wonderful Monday, and we look forward to seeing you right back here at 7 o'clock Eastern on May 3rd. Bye.
Thank you.